Lincolnshire County Council Planning and Regulation Committee. It's Monday the 4th of December, 10:30 a.m. according to Apple time. I never quite trust the County Council clock. It's a minute later with the County Council clock, but I'm sure Mr Apple's probably got it a little bit more accurate. I'm Councillor Ian Fleetwood. I'm the chairman of the committee. To my immediate right, I've got Councillor Charlotte Vernon, who's my vice chairman. In front of me, we've got various officers for various functions of the council, democratic planning, highways issues. To the rear, I've got various speakers queuing to talk to us all this morning, and I think online we may have one or two people watching us. As is normal, we're not expecting any fire alarms. We do test the fire alarms at County Council at around 9 a.m. on a Monday. That's already been done, so if you do hear a fire alarm, please exit the building to the rear of me. There's doors that take you out to the front of the county offices, congregate in the car park, and we'll hopefully account for everybody. I know it's a cold day, but please don't run away. We'll just make sure you're there. Otherwise, we're not expecting any further interruptions. Water's available for various speakers, etc. at the rear of the room if you wish. So without further ado, I think I've covered the formalities, and I'll therefore move on to the agenda. Item 1 is apologies replacement members.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Pepper, Councillor Hassan and Councillor Overton.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is declarations of members' interests. Obviously, members can declare now or at any stage during the meeting should they wish. I don't see anybody wishing to indicate, so I'll just take it that that's okay at the moment. Item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting of the Planning and Regulation Committee held on the 6th of November, pages 5 to 20. I'm quite happy to move those. Can I have a second account? Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Do we have any dissenters? I could ask you to wave your hands in the air. Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Reid, you weren't here, so therefore you will basically avoid, so that's no problem. Okay, so we'll take those as a true record and nobody's saying otherwise, so I'm quite happy with that. Item 4 is notes of the site visit held last week, 29th of November 2023. These have been circulated via email. I've read them. A good and accurate record. Thank you, Rachel. It was an interesting visit out, and I think it was well worth doing. That application will be dealt with in a little while. Okay, so if you're happy with those, seeing no dissenters, okay. I will therefore move you to item 5, which is traffic items 5.1 Anderby, and this is Sea Road, the proposed 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Jan Gibson, Programme Leader for Traffic. The first report today relates to a suggested 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on the A16 at Otterby. Are there any plans? Next slide, please. Sorry, yes, we're at Anderby Creek on Sea Road. I'm looking at the wrong report. Apologies for that. Proposed 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Next slide, please. The plan shows the existing 40-mile-an-hour limit shown in red. The Parish Council has asked us to review that limit. So in accordance with the speed limit policy, we've taken mean speeds via speed surveys to ascertain the mean speed. To the west of the village, a mean speed of 29 indicates that a 30-mile-an-hour limit is justified against the policy, whereas the other two further east indicate that it's a borderline case. We're therefore recommending that the committee considers its power of discretion where a borderline case has been identified, so that we can pursue a 30-mile-an-hour limit at this location. Thank you.
Thank you. Whilst there's quite a few local people use this piece of road, there's an unbelievable amount of people all the way through the year, whether it's to go and visit the sea, Anderby Creek, Huttoft, etc., or if it's slightly further up with regard to this time of the year with seals. So there's a lot of traffic that isn't quite so local, possibly who don't know the road as easily as they might. and I'm pleased that you've done the checks with regard to the speed. I'm quite happy to propose the recommendation. Seconded by Councillor Hall. Would anybody like to speak to the application? Okay, so all in favour, please show now. Thank you. So that is agreed. 5.2 then is the A16 that ought to be, again, a suggested 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Jan, please.
Thank you. Again, we've been asked to consider a review of the existing 40-mile-an-hour speed limit at Utterby on the A16. Just waiting for that plan to come up. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Utterby lies just to the north of Louth. Next slide, please. The existing 40 is shown in blue. 2 speed surveys indicate mean speeds of 35 miles per hour. This again allows this section to be considered as a borderline case, and the recommendation again is that the committee considers its power of discretion and allows a 30-mile-an-hour limit to be pursued at this location. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. Councillor Hall.
Sorry, yes, I propose that we accept the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very happy to second. I know the area quite well, and it will help, I think, the local traffic there as well.
Well, certainly, I'll take you back a few years. If you watch some of these TV channels where they have police interceptors on them, I think that on occasion we've seen the A16 featured on various pieces. So I fully support the 30-mile-an-hour limit too. Anyway, proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. Yes, I can see lots of enthusiasm there. That is unanimous. So we will therefore move to the next application, which takes us to Metheringham and Drury Street and St Wilfrid's Close. Proposed waiting loading restrictions. Jan, please.
Thank you. The Parish Council raised issues with us about obstruction by parked vehicles around the access to Church Walk. Next slide, please. Drury Street lies just to the south of the High Street in Metheringham. Next slide, please. So originally we proposed quite a length of 24-hour restriction on Drury Street, but in response to residents' concerns, we've reduced it down to focus around the entrance, the access to Church Walk and the surgery car park, and also around the junction with St Wilfrid's Close. The proposal seeks on the west side to restrict loading also to prevent blue badge holders parking there, and the restrictions opposite that are there to avoid any displacement of parking opposite the junction. We've received a number of objections to the proposal based around residents being unable to park as some do not have off-street parking, the displacement of parking obstructing driveways and accesses and garages, and also a request for residents parking in Wilfrid's Close to stop any displaced parking using that area. Officers note these comments, but our belief is that the restrictions are the minimal required to achieve unobstructed traffic flow through here, and will serve to maintain the bus route that also runs through here, and we recommend therefore that the objections are overruled. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction again. I don't know, I probably know Metheringham better than most of the committee. This is in the centre. It's not too far from the primary school, so we all know the issues surrounding parking and schools in various parts of the county, and we've all seen them. I'm quite happy to propose the recommendations. Would anybody like to speak to it or second it? Councillor Hall would like to second it. Okay. Anybody wish to speak? Seeing none, therefore proposed and seconded. All in favour? That is unanimous, but Councillor Ashley Morris has left the room, so therefore hasn't voted. Okay, so thank you very much, Jan. from the Highways Department. Another successful journey for you. Before you go, I'd like to wish you a Merry Christmas, because you will have gone by the end of the meeting. So, and thank you for all you do for the council.
Thank you.
So, as we change over officers, I don't know, Councillor Ashley Morris may be back, and therefore we'll then continue with the next application. It would seem unfair to start the application without her being present and having full regard to all of the information. Okay. Thank you. So we've now done a little bit of housekeeping. Councillor Ashley Morris is back in the room, so therefore we'll progress to item 6, County Matters Applications 6.1, and this is the application to connect the gas to grid anaerobic digester at Manby, where we went to last week. So can I ask for an officer introduction, please?
Take the bench off, shouldn't I?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. My name is Mark Willis. I'm the Applications Manager, and I'll be presenting the item this morning. As you say, this application takes us to Manby. It's for a proposed development located just to the southwest corner of the former RAF Manby airfield. If we can have the slides, please, Rachel. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. In terms of location, the red line boundary is shown on the plan. The area in total extends to just shy of 23 hectares, which includes the main proposal site for the AD plant and an underground connecting gas pipeline, which will connect to the gas grid, where the biogas will be transported and transferred into the national grid network. Site itself, as I say, is located to the west of Manby and Grimolby, 2.1 kilometres from Legbourne and 4 kilometres to the east of Louth. Site itself is gained off the access of the B1200, which passes to the north of the site. Can I have the next slide, please, Rachel? I won't propose to go through the report in great detail. It's a detailed report and there's a lot of information in there. But to just give you an overview, the development is for an anaerobic digestion facility and fertiliser production plant. It's a large-scale facility that would produce, as I say, biodigestate, carbon dioxide as part of a byproduct, and gas for transport to the grid. The facility processes 304,000 tonnes of mixed feedstock per year, comprising of cow, hen, poultry and straw, principally, and utilise those products to generate, as I say, the products identified. The plan on screen just gives you an indication of the site layout. It's a large facility comprising a number of tanks and large-scale buildings. If I can have the next, sorry, just to look at, sorry, go back one, thank you. Just in terms of some of the detail, the site's been arranged with the main tanks and digester tanks within a bonded area in the central part. We're surrounded by 2 buildings principally, or complex of buildings. One, the feedstock reception building to the north, and then to the east would be the biodigester production drying facilities, with the gas upgrade equipment located to the southern end. Next slide, please. Some slides here just give you an indication of the site as it would look on elevation. So you can see there's a number of large-scale buildings there. And it just gives you an elevation of the different size of tanks. Next slide, please. In terms of the tanks, there's 9 fermentation and AD tanks. They're around 10 metres to the wall with a gas dome on top, which would take them to around 15 metres. They're 40-metre diameter tanks. And then on top of that, there are a number of buffer hydrologist tanks, which will be a similar height of around 10 metres. and then there's a number of stacks associated with the biofilters as part of the odour control unit. Next slide, please. This is just an elevational drawing. It's in the report of the feedstock reception building, where the straw would be brought into the building all enclosed, along with the chicken litter and cattle manure, where it would be stored and processed all under cover within an odour controlled building. That building is around 106 metres long by 40 metres and around 16 metres to the ridge. Next slide, please. This is the biodigestate production and drying facility. This is a complex of a number of buildings interlinked. Again, all odour control unit. Effectively, the digestate, once been processed, would come into this building where it would be processed, capable of being dried and then bagged, ready for sale as a biofertiliser. Next slide, please. This is some of the, just a schematic of the gas upgrade equipment, which will be located at the southern end of the site. We should upgrade the gas prior to it being transported to the grid. Next slide. This just gives an indication. Within the report you see that, and I'll come on to this briefly in a moment, there's been some noise monitoring undertaken as part of the assessment to identify the impacts or potential impacts of noise. The yellows on the screen identify receptor points that have been used within the noise assessment to identify noise levels deriving from this plant and whether or not that would be within acceptable limits. So just to give you an idea of some of the receptor locations, they correlate with locations of residential properties, in particular properties towards the east and to the west, R4, for example, R3 and R6. Next slide, please. This is just a photograph of the main site entrance. As part of the proposal, it's to upgrade this entrance, some highway improvement works to widen the radius on the junction to enable a better access for HGVs, two passenger HGVs and visibility in both directions. There'll also be resurfacing works as part of those improvements. Next slide, please. This is a view west from the entrance, heading west out of the site. Just to give you a view of the B1200. Next slide, please. The view in the opposite direction, so east heading towards Manby. Next slide, please. This is a view from the proposal site. Members who are on the visit will probably recognise this. We did see this on the visit. This is a view back towards Manby itself of the residential properties that are in the distance. And you can probably just make out on the slide the hangars associated with the old airbase. That just gives you an indication of the proximity of the site to those properties. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides are visual photo montages taken from the application. I've just included these again to give a bit of context and aid understanding. This view is from around the entrance location of the site. So this shows the site as it currently is. If we can have the next slide, please. This shows you a photo montage with the development as constructed. And again, it's in the report, but the intention is the coloration of the building would be goosewing grey to minimise the visual impact of that development and the size of the buildings. And next slide, please, Rachel. And this one just gives an indication, 10 years, I think it is, on with the proposed landscape planting having matured. So it gives you an indication of some of the screening afforded by the landscaping once in a place. Next slide, please. So the same, this one again, members on the visit will be familiar with this location. This is located on the road, just near the residential properties that sit on the edge of the former former RAF field. So the proposal site, as you can see with the arrow there, gives you an indication of the control tower. So that's a point of reference. So this is the existing view. Next view, please. Photo montage again showing the presence of the building as it would appear. Next slide, please. And again, some mitigation planting. Whilst not obviously screening, would in time certainly help screen some of the lower elements and extents of the building. Okay, thank you. Next slide, I think that's probably it. Yeah, okay, thank you. In terms of the report, I say I don't propose to go to it in detail. This detailed report and sets out the application. The application is supported by an environmental statement. That environmental statement has looked at a range of different environmental topics. The usual suspects I suspect in terms of odour, noise, traffic, ecology, hydrology, and looked at those matters in detail. In terms of the policy section on page 67 to 69, that identifies the relevant policies, which in this case are the National Planning Policy Framework, the Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Local Plan, but also the East Lindsey Local Plan. On pages 69 to 77, sets out the representations that have been received from statutory consultees. You'll see within the report objections have been received from the Parish Council, and they're here to speak, I understand, today, so I won't repeat those, but again, they're in the report. A holding objection from the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust, which relates to the requirement for a biodiversity management plan, which again, you'll see in the report has been dealt with. And then in terms of representations, the applications received a significant number of representations from local public. 102 at the time the report was published objecting. We have had in the update a further representation, so it takes that to 103. 2 letters of support and 1 fairly neutral in terms of its position. In terms of the recommendation that's set out towards the back end of the report, in terms of the main issues to be considered, that sets out each of those issues in detail, but perhaps ones to just highlight is in terms of location. This, as I say, site is located in the open countryside. It's not located in an industrial area or an area that's allocated for industrial type development. However, the Minerals and Waste Local Plan does make provision for developments of this type where they can't be located in such areas. And that's policy M5 sets out the W5 sets out the criteria for which are relevant for consideration. That's detailed on, in particular, paragraph 42 on page 80 of the report as to why the officers feel this this development meets those criteria in this particular case, and extends on to paragraph 43. In terms of landscape and visual impact, it is a significant proposal, large-scale development, large buildings and tanks. Measures have been incorporated into the design of the scheme to try and minimise those impacts as far as possible, accepting that there will be a visual impact as a consequence of its size and scale. Those measures include, as I say, coloration of the building, mitigation planting, which over time will help to soften and assimilate that development into a local area. It's notable East Lindsey District Council have raised no objection to the proposal, subject to those landscape and mitigation measures being secured. In terms of traffic, a lot of representations received have been raised in relation to traffic and the HGV movements in particularly. In terms of numbers, around 124 HGV movements in total per day at operational phase is what's been projected based on the tonnage, and that also accounts for import of materials for the fertiliser. Highways have raised no objection, having assessed and looked at the traffic data, the speed of the road, the improvements that have been identified, and are satisfied that from a highway safety perspective the scheme is acceptable. So there's been no objection on a highway technicality. In terms of odour and noise, there are again measures built into the development to minimise noise. 1, the distance from those residential properties, but 2, ensuring that all operations for the feedstock receipt and processing are undercover within enclosed buildings with an odour control system. Again, no objections have been raised from the Environment Agency. This is a development that would also be subject to a permit, and that would impose further conditions and controls in terms of the activities on site. In terms of then the recommendation, pulling it all together towards the end, the recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to a series of conditions. And if I can just draw members' attention to the update that went out on Friday, since the publication of the report, conversations have continued with the applicant around some of the wording of the conditions. So if members are minded to recommend approval this morning or approve this morning, it's recommended that the conditions as attached in the update be imposed. They reflect some minor tweaks to the timing and phasing for some of the wording for some of the conditions. It's also, in part of that conversation, the applicant has now confirmed their willingness to agree to a routing restriction for HGV traffic as well, which will effectively place restrictions on traffic travelling through Grimolby and Manby and avoiding peak periods along two particular roads, Tinkle Street and Carlton Road, during peak school times to avoid any conflict with traffic in that time period. That is subject to some flexibility to allow for in the event of feedstock materials coming from a 5-mile radius. So the officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to the Section 106 routing restriction and the revised conditions as set out in the update that was issued on Friday. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Willis, for your comments. Now, I've got one or two speakers with regard to this. The first one I'm going to take is an objector, and that's Councillor Terry Knowles. So the floor is yours. With regard to all speakers, we allow up to 3 minutes to address the committee, and then potentially the committee may wish to ask the odd question.
Have I got 3 minutes, sir?
You have 3 minutes, so whenever you're ready.
Wow. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you, Mr Chairman, for allowing me to speak today. As you say, my name is Councillor Terry Knowles, District Councillor for Grimolby and Manby. Also, for my sins, I am Chairman of the local Parish Council, Devil for Punishment. You will have read the Parish Council's submissions, and I'm certainly not going to repeat them today. The officer's report, I thought, was very, very thorough, very detailed. But unfortunately, some of the detail in there has been assumed, there have been assumptions made that are very much in favour of the developer. If you look on page 43, it becomes obvious that my residents, who I'm obviously here to represent, do not want any further industrialisation of Manby Airfield. It states in the report very clearly, and we've had this said to us on many occasions, this is a very, very large development. With regards to my villages, it's massive. If I can turn to the traffic movements, page 62, there was a traffic survey. And when was it done? December. How could Highways and the council accept a traffic survey for such a massive development in December? On the 1200, which is a very busy and a lethal road sometimes, the traffic quadruples in the summer. In Grimolby and Manby, we are 4 miles from the coast. And the traffic situation in the summer is horrendous. I myself think this is scandalous that this has been done. It's a little bit like doing a shopping survey at Fortnum and Mason's at 5 o'clock on a Christmas Eve. Very misleading. On page 84 of the report, it comments on the concerns re traffic. It speaks of 124 traffic movements. That, frankly, is nonsense. This assumes working on 7 days a week, it's 6 days a week. It works out, friends, and work it out for yourself. It works out at well over 200 traffic movements. This, on top of the holiday traffic, is a recipe for disaster. Mr Chairman and members of the committee, I would ask you to reject this application. My people don't want it, the Parish Council doesn't want it, and frankly, I don't want it either. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. You were a few seconds over, but I think you had important things to say. Would anybody on the committee like to ask any questions of Councillor Knowles with regard to the application? Okay, well, thank you for your comments, sir. So I'll therefore move to our next speaker, which is speaking on behalf of the applicant. I believe we have James Dorman and Alex Lawrence. If you'd like to come down, we can again afford you up to 3 minutes to address the committee. In view of the fact I did allow Councillor Knowles a few seconds over, if you go over by a couple of seconds or so, I'll be lenient. You may have questions.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is James Dorman, as you rightly point out, the Director of Mambi BGE Limited. Last week, King Charles spoke at COP28 Summit in Dubai. He warned world leaders that we are at a turning point, noting that we remain so dreadfully far off track and calling for genuine transformational action in order to tackle climate change. Global policy, national policy, regional policy, and more importantly, local policy, all align on the actions that are to be taken to combat global warming. The launch of Powering Up Britain, the Net Zero Growth Plan in March 2023, opens with the line, energy security and net zero are two sides of the same coin. Straw chopped and left on the land, manure stored for months and then spread on fields allows decomposition to begin, releasing CO2, ammonia, methane into the atmosphere. It's all around us. At Mambi BGE, straw and manures will be processed in an enclosed system, ensuring that greenhouse gases are captured and used to displace fossil fuels. The biomethane that will be produced from Mambi BGE will provide enough carbon negative energy to heat 54,000 homes annually, equivalent to the city the size of Lincoln. The food-grade biogenic CO2 from Mambi BGE could replace 10% of the current UK demand, which is mostly imported, and the biofertilisers will be supplied to arable farmers supplying the straw, displacing synthetic fertilisers produced using fossil fuels. Lincolnshire and East Midlands area is home to some of the most productive soils in the UK, with 69% of land used for arable and a substantial proportion of the UK poultry and beef production. This has resulted in over a quarter of employment within the greater Lincolnshire area being embedded in the food sector. Mambi BGE will contribute to the future protection of the food supply chain, which is vital to Lincolnshire, its people and the food security of the UK. The economic benefit locally will be over 175 million in capital investment, 14.5 million in feedstock supply contracts with farmers annually, the creation of 100 permanent full-time jobs and over 4 million in direct payroll, and the ongoing economic benefit from the support and maintenance services necessary to operate the biorefinery. We know that some residents are unsurprisingly concerned with odour, noise, visual impact and transport associated with the plant. We have listened to concerns and have actively embedded mitigation throughout the design to overcome potential impacts. These include best available techniques to mitigate and manage odour levels, noise attenuation and mitigation techniques, increasing the areas of landscaping to mitigate the visual impact, and agreeing to implement a Section 106 agreement for heavy goods vehicles movements on Tinkle Street and Carlton Road. We want to be good neighbours, we want to be a significant employer and contributor locally and regionally, and we especially want to do our part in the battle to get to net zero. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and you were spot on 3 minutes, so well done. Any questions from the committee of the applicant? Well, again, it's an easy ride for you, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
So if you'd like to retire to the audience, I'll go back to Mr. Willis and see if he has any comment. Oh no, before I do that, let's not forget the local member, Councillor McNally. You're hiding over there.
Yeah. Good morning, Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. Firstly, can I say thank you for inviting me on the site visit and for allowing me to highlight the location of the schools, the nearest houses, and also allowing me to speak as a local member today. A public meeting was held at Mambi Village Hall where lots of concerns were raised, and I've also received lots of emails and phone calls about the site application as well as my own concerns. I will summarise these below. The smell and the noise due to the proximity of housing should be conditioned with an odour management plan. All HGVs arriving or leaving the site should be covered, and wheel washes should be installed on site to stop any spread of diseases like the recent cases of avian flu. There is a farm entrance opposite the application site, which would cause turning issues. The control tower on the boundary of the site, I think we all saw that on the site visit, is of significant interest. All the planting of trees should be done before any work starts on site to decrease the timescale for screening. A community liaison group should be set up so that any issues locally can be addressed with the site operators. Any Section 106 monies should be used locally within Manby and Grimbleby. No HGV should be used in Tinkle Street, where the primary school is, nor Carlton Road, which is opposite that. Both of these roads have lots of housing on either side, are difficult to navigate at the best of times, and would cause disruption, especially during school times. And also, no traffic survey has been done on these roads. No HGV should be coming from the east of the B1200 through the village beyond 1900 hours. At the end of the public meeting, a unanimous vote was taken to reject this proposal. The communities I represent are having to deal with nuclear proposals, possibility of pylons, and now this. This is of no real benefit to the community, just more mass industrialisation of our countryside. And I hope the committee will reject this application. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the local member, Councillor McNally? Okay, well, thank you, Councillor McNally. I will go back to Mr Willis now, and you've had 3 speakers. Various comments, suggestions have been made, so the floor is yours to address anything you feel.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a few things, but in terms of, if I can just pick up on a few of those, in terms of the traffic survey that's been mentioned and the timing of that, that is detailed within the report and the response to that. Yes, the survey, it's true to say the survey was conducted in December and issues have been raised regarding that. The point, I guess, on that is Highways have looked at it, and it's in the report on page 84, paragraph 56. But in terms of the traffic survey, it's important to note that what that looks at is a percentage increase in traffic based on the baseline. So effectively, when traffic levels are lower and therefore the proposed increased traffic numbers from this, it would actually result in a worse effect, if you like, because the baseline is low. So actually, whilst the survey was done when numbers are low on the road from existing traffic, because of the higher number of traffic from this, it would actually result in a greater effect. So from that point of view, it's satisfied that highway survey is reflective and sufficient. In terms of a couple of the other things, and I didn't get all of them, so if you want to come back to me, that's fine. But the conditions that have been proposed include a submission for an odour management plan. That would be a condition on the planning permission, but it also would be an obligation under the environmental permit for the Environment Agency. In terms of landscaping timing, I think the difficulty with requiring landscaping in advance of work starting is that it's very likely that the landscaping would be damaged through the construction phase, so there would be no merit in putting trees or planting in that would potentially be damaged and would need replacement. So that's very deliberate. In terms of the control tower, it isn't a listed property. The nearest listed properties are located to the east, and consideration has been given to those. Traffic we have, and the recommendation, as has been mentioned by the applicant as well, agreed to look at a routing restriction on the times for those routes as well. So that's something we can certainly look at beyond the commitment that's already been made. I think that was most of the points, but if there's anything particular, then all the members have it in the debate. I can respond to them.
Councillor McNally?
Yes, thank you for allowing me to come back. There was a community liaison group.
Yeah, so from a planning point of view, there's nothing per se that requires one, and I think that's very much in the applicant's gift. I think I'm looking across the room and getting a nod that they may well look to set that up. Again, if necessary, we could also look, if members were minded, to place that as a requirement within a 106 that a community liaison group has been set up. That's similar to what we've done on mineral operations, for example, in the past.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. And the only other one was the the HGVs coming from through the east of the village after, I don't know, 7 o'clock or so, well, you know, going through all the houses.
Yeah, again, so I think within the routing restriction, we've made a recommendation to avoid peak times for school times. If there's an additional time restriction that's being sought, then that's something that, again, I'm looking across the room at the applicant and getting a nod. So I think they're willing to discuss an inclusion of a restriction for that particular traffic within that radius through those hours as well. So we can certainly take that forward, should members be minded to approve it with that additional addition clause.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've allowed you 2 or 3 bites, Councillor McNally, so we'll go back to committee now. So thank you, Mr Willis. Yes, we did have a planning site visit to this location last Wednesday, and it was very valuable with regard to local knowledge, although I know the area quite well. I've been to Tedder Park for a variety of reasons. I've not actually been down to the control tower and viewed back towards Manby Park, or vice versa, been to Manby Park where the housing is and looked back towards where the potential development was. In some respects it was useful having a pile of bales at that location, and it's been suggested they might be there for one reason or another. I know that in other areas of Lincolnshire, piles of bales are stored on runways, just a way of storage, but it was useful to having a large pile of bales, because when you look back from Manby Park towards the location, it made it very visible, and it gave you something of an idea of how large the structures would be. I applaud Mr Willis with regard to his updates with the recommendations and the conditions update, and I would fully support the section 106 with the routing restriction going to restricting traffic after 1900 hours, and indeed the addition of the community liaison group within it. And Mr Willis can see the applicant from here. I don't know what the applicant said, but I think it would be good for the local community that those implications are put into place. Quite a few people did visit last week. I would encourage those people that did to speak and make any comment to the application. So, committee, how do you feel about this one? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I go into, shall I say, the planning policy grounds, I'd just like to ask Mr Willis, and I may have missed this in the report, and if I have, apologies, what is the BMV classification of the land?
I'm not going to put anybody under pressure. I would prefer to stroll through this one steadily so that we do have all the facts, so that we do ensure that everybody knows how we've arrived at the right decision. So, you know, I'm not going to pressure anybody. We're just going to take a nice, steady look at this application. I'm quite happy if it's not clear, for you to say that it's not clear. Predominantly most of this work is going to be on the runway type area, isn't it? So the classification of the land may not quite be so relevant, but...
Yes, certainly in terms of the area, it is part of the former airfield, so it would have been worked at some point. I'll continue to search. I'm sure there was some information in there. In fact, if not, I'm getting a nod from the room if that would help members from, I know the applicant's not spoken, but if not, they can probably answer the question. But Chairman, did you want to?
Yes, I will allow the applicant to answer that question if the knowledge is known.
Natural England were consulted on this because of the site's previous use as an off-road centre. It was agreed that all of the soils were disturbed, so it didn't actually have an agricultural land classification.
So back to Councillor Smith.
Thank you for the applicant for that clarification. I read this with a very fine-tooth comb, and I fully understand the concerns that Councillor McNally has raised and that residents have. However, in planning terms, and I read this and reread this, I cannot, as I always do, if the recommendation is approved, I try and find the other way and vice versa. I could not find planning grounds to refuse this. The more I read through, the more it's quite clear that it's supported, because paragraph 84 of the National Planning Policy Framework supports the application, and that's subsection A and B. It complies with paragraph 113 of the NPPF. Paragraph 152 also supports the application. W1 of the minerals plan is silent. D2 of the mineral and waste plan supports it, as does W5, as Mr Willis has already alluded to in his summations. So, Mr Chairman, on that basis, having had the site visit and not finding any planning grounds to refuse this application, I am quite happy to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'll therefore move on to Councillor Ashton next, please.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I think along with other members that were able to go on the site visit last week, it was incredibly useful to go and see the distances of the site from the local housing, from the local village. I'm familiar with that area quite well, having travelled up there fairly frequently over the course of about 6 years as an East Lindsey district councillor, so I know that road quite well. But similar to yourself, it was interesting to stand both on the site and adjacent to the housing, and appreciate the distances and the size and scale involved. And I don't think there's any doubt that this is going to be quite a significant digester. We're quite familiar with them now in Lincolnshire, based on farms. If anyone has travelled down to in the Neely direction on the A142, there's quite a big one at the side of the road at Meeple, which I think gives a better understanding of the size and scale of these things. And I can appreciate local concerns of local members and members of the public, that this thing is somewhat incongruous in an area of outstanding natural beauty in a rural location. But I very much imagine the same was said when the RAF put the hangars up some 70 years ago. And I think that, again, in my mind, forms, you have to take the landscape as a whole and look at what is there. And, say, less than half a mile away from this location, there's some pretty big hangars, and since the RAF ceased to maintain them, as well as what they might have done historically, again, that you can't really claim that they're attractive. So I feel this, in that context, in that landscape context, with the screening, with the planting, when those trees are grown up, then the impact on the landscape won't be what you might think it would be when you imagine the site at Meeple plonked in that location. I'm incredibly grateful for the points that have been raised by Councillor McNally, and moreover that many of them seem to have been addressed within the report, within the conditions. I'm very happy to second Councillor Smith, but I would just ask Councillor Smith if his moving of this includes the section 106 requiring a liaison group to be established, and that is including the traffic routing restrictions as suggested in operating hours and other matters covered in the supplementary report, because I think they are really important towards giving that degree of certainty to people living locally that this is not going to be the impact that they might have feared that it would otherwise have been. And I think it's important to make sure that we are listening to the local members, both Councillor McNally and also Councillor Knowles, as far as it is possible to do so within the conditions that are available to us.
Yes, it certainly does, and apologies, Chairman, that I did not make that clear.
Okay, so The proposal and the seconding is with regard to the conditions update received from the other day, Friday, with regard to the section 106 with the routing restriction being 1900 hours, and with regard to the community liaison group. That is what I have tabled, and I have no other proposals at this moment. Having said that, my Vice Chairman would like to speak now.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much to the ward member for his very interesting points. And again, I fully support the idea of a liaison group. I live quite close to Ketton Cement, which is not called Ketton Cement anymore, but they have a village liaison group, and that works very well in maintaining relations between them and the local area. The two other points that I wanted to raise, I note that Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust have raised a holding objection based on the production of the biodiversity until further information comes regarding the biodiversity net gain. Will they be reconsulted once that's established further? And then the second point that I'd like to make is regarding the the delivery and export of materials between 6 a.m. and midnight, Monday to Saturday. I do feel that those hours are lengthy, and I've looked at another anaerobic digester plant's permission, and they were conditioned to be 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday and 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday. I do feel that sort of having deliveries taking place sort of up to midnight and then again from 6 a.m. does have an impact on residential amenity, so I'd welcome sort of comments on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the BNG point, yes, there will be as part of the issue from the Wildlife Trust point of view is the evidence behind what's been assessed at this stage. I'm satisfied that the information is sufficient to make a planning decision and a condition. That condition will require a landscape plan. We can certainly consult the Wildlife Trust on that detail when that comes in. On the traffic, obviously we need to consider each case on its merits. What I would say in this particular incident, given what we've discussed with regard to the restrictions, the majority of the residential properties that are likely to be impacted live to the east. And with that in mind, with the restrictions we've just talked about, then the hours for traffic travelling west or arriving from the west, there's very few properties in that direction. So certainly the noise assessment that's been done has identified impacts of traffic noise and been deemed acceptable limits. So from that perspective, there'd be no, from my advice, would be there'd be no reason necessarily to put a restriction on for those hours, because there's precedent elsewhere, doesn't necessarily need to apply here.
Thank you. I'm very sort of aware of obviously each case on its own individual merits, and particularly given the changes in the hours during the day, but I did just want to ask about that, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Noisia, please.
Thank you, Chair. I listened to it. I've been on the site and I go past that road twice a day sometime for past 20 years. So I know the area really well. Like the Pally Council say, during summer can be very busy, traffic. And I listened to Councillor Smith, Councillor McNally, and Charlotte. My concern is the resident and the traffic, because like you say, 6 to 12, it's a long time, 6 days a week. And it's a school and a new area, people moving, a lot of house being built out that area. So you have to, if we have some kind of, I know, if we have some kind of like really agree to say different time for the traffic into the village, and Papa agree to say this will, support not like 6 to 12, because 24-hour control. I know you tested about the noise, you say not that much smell, that's one of my concerns. And in this point, I'm worried about lots of lorry. I know we have farm and caravan and all that go, but if we could have more lorry go in that road, it's quite worrying. That's what I think. That's what my own opinion anyhow. Because a lot of children and elderly people live around that area. And the road in some village is like narrow. So it's quite worrying. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anything you want to add there, Mr. Willis?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, again, I'd just say that the resolution at the moment has been with the 106 with the restricted hours. Those hours have been extended to prevent those traffic movements, we say from 7 o'clock. So again, there would be a restriction on deliveries coming from, particularly from the east after those hours, under the resolution as it stands. And with that in mind, that I think that would provide the sufficient comfort and protection.
Thank you for your comments. Right, I see no further speakers. So the application has been proposed to be accepted by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Ashton on the basis that we have the conditions update circulated from Friday, and also the section 106 has due regard to the routine restrictions from 1900 hours and a community liaison group within it. I don't think I've missed anything there, so we're very clear about what we could be voting for. And I would encourage those people that were on the site visit to vote now. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Those against, please show. That is very clearly carried. So therefore that one is granted. Thank you very much. So I'll therefore move over to the next application, which is 6.2 for the change of use of redundant courier transportation business at Gosperton Clough, Spalding. So officer introduction, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Can I get the slides up, please? Thank you. Yeah, so this application actually relates to a proposal which was before the committee earlier this year in February. This application, as I say, relates to an end-of-life vehicle dismantling processing facility at Gosperton Clough. In terms of, just by way of introduction and location, the site itself is located just on the junction of Beck Bank and the B1397 through Gosperton Clough. You can see hopefully on the slide there a red line boundary in the corner. It's approximately 3 miles west, of Gosperton and 5 miles north of Spalding. The site's located within the defined settlement boundary of Gosperton, Risegate and Clough, as shown on the local plan, surrounded by agricultural land and other residential properties. In terms of the proposal, as I say, the application was presented and granted permission back in February this year. As part in granting that permission, some pre-commencement conditions were imposed that required further details to be submitted before the operations could lawfully commence. Those details sought to secure matters which hadn't had sufficient information at the time, which included site drainage, means of disposal for foul and contaminated water, landscaping, security fencing, and a flood evacuation plan. Despite those conditions being in place, the operations had commenced on site without compliance with those conditions. As a consequence of that, officers and the local authority, planning authority, have decided that the permission was therefore lost in terms of any benefit that could be afforded for failure to comply with those conditions. So the applicants effectively resubmitted an application to re-establish permission for the use that was previously granted. And in doing that, it's submitted that information that was previously required as part of the pre-commencement conditions. The development itself is the same as that which was previously presented, and again, therefore I won't go through that in great detail, but you'll see on the report, in particular on paragraphs 5 and 6 on page 105, it describes the activities which are involved on site, which are effectively importation of disused vehicles, dismantling, draining of fluids, stripping into individual reusable car parts, temporary storage, and then transport off-site. As I say, the location of the site in itself has not changed. The operations in terms of permitted hours that were previously granted have not changed, neither of the activities that were proposed. The main differences, as I say, in this application are to pick up those matters that were missed or not adequate previously, and therefore conditions have been imposed. So this time there includes details of the site drainage that's now been installed within the site. There's additional landscape planting that's been carried out within the site as well. a flood evacuation plan similarly. In terms of representations received, they're set out in the report. A local member has objected to the scheme with similar concerns to the previous application insofar as it not considering this a suitable location for such a development. The parish council have not objected but requested a reduction in the operating hours to protect the amenity of local residents. No objections have been received from the district council. In terms of public representations, we received 17 representations to this application. 7 of those are opposed to the development and 10 letters in support. In terms, as I say, if I can have the slides, I'll just talk through some of the slides very quickly. Just thinking about it. Is not. Is it frozen? No, there we go. Okay, that's just. So this is the site. The red line boundary is a former. I think it was a vehicle site with garages and dilapidated buildings on site. So you can see the location of the site there. The property in the blue to the south is owned by the applicant, occupied by the applicant or associates of the applicant. So they're the nearest residential adjoining property. Next slide, please. This is just a schematic showing the site. So the operations take place within the building that's retained on site. The yard area will be used for the storage of incoming vehicles and empty shells. Post-processing. Next slide, please. This is just a extract from the local plan. The red area effectively demarks the permitted development settlement boundary, shall I say, of the Gosperton, Risegate and Clough. The site itself is located within one of those red lines, so therefore an area that's been identified within the boundary development limits. Next slide, please. And some photos now just of the site. There has been a change since the previous application insofar as some landscape screening that did exist. Oh, let's jump one. Go back one for me, please, Rachel. Thank you. Landscape screening, this is the fence has been installed, which was originally proposed. Some landscape planting that existed previously has been removed. You can see some supplementary planting has been carried out by the applicant as part of the proposal. That's obviously still yet to mature, but that will provide some screening in the future. Next slide, please. This is the entrance site. Onto the main road there, that will be utilised for import of vehicles. Next slide. And this is a view back to the old ship inn itself, which is now no longer a pub but a residential property associated with the applicant. And you can see the screen, the security fencing that's now been erected within the site. Next slide. I think that's possibly the last one actually. No. This is again the what will be the western boundary and some of the landscape planting that's been carried out internal to the site, which again would in time mature to provide some effective screen. Next slide. I think that's it actually. Yeah, okay. So in terms of, say, the report, nothing from a policy perspective has changed from the previous application. The application in terms of the operations and the activities are the same as those which were previously considered by this committee and on balance considered acceptable and therefore permission granted. The main difference, as I say, therefore, this time is to secure the details of those matters which were previously missing. They now form part of the proposal, so if permission be granted, then effectively those matters are now addressed. Therefore, the recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions which largely reflect those that were imposed previously as set out in the report on page 123 onwards. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So with this report, we have 2 speakers. First of all, Kevin Adams, who's speaking as an objector. And then to follow, we have Cheryl Deakin, who will be speaking in support of the application, but who isn't the agent. So, Kevin Adams first, please. Again, I think you know the ground rules now. 3 minutes to speak to the committee. They may ask you a question or two. They may not. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee, for giving me this opportunity to speak. Noise is subjective, and residents who are out all day or live in noisy households may not hear the operation as much as us. But the report, which seems to hold the most influence with you, the committee, has been written by someone who has not spent last summer in our back garden. Contrary to what has been written about this proposal, being no more adverse than previous operations, and even that it is similar, I can say in the 4.5 years we have lived at our property, we heard nothing from the site until this business operated unauthorised for 8 months spanning the summer. Our relative peace and quiet was replaced with the sound of smashing windscreens being dropped into a container, crashing metal, hammering, other impact tools, and a reversing forklift, the warning signal of which is over 100 decibels, and the centre of our garden is no more than 80 metres from the site. The noise at times has been intolerable in its repetition, effectively removing the quiet enjoyment of our garden and grounds. After one has cut through the planning speak, which no doubt ticks all the boxes required to satisfy government directives, and whatever fanciful notions about noise containment are asserted, I find it incredulous that such an operation could ever be given permission to operate in a residential area. If it wasn't noisy, I can assure you I would not be standing here setting out this objection today. If permission is granted, other than the operator adhering to the stipulated times and not working outside them, as was previously the case, I don't see how our future experience will be in any way different. I very much doubt that anyone responsible for these planning policies would be happy for this type of operation to move into their village. And whilst I appreciate that many pacifying suggestions are being offered, you cannot escape the fact that the dismantling of cars, by the very nature of the business, is noisy. You are here today in your capacities as councillors, but I urge you to please ask yourself a vital question. Would you, as individuals, ever consider moving to a property which you knew to be in the vicinity of a car breaker? If the answer is no, then how can you, in all good conscience, vote yes for this proposal today? Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're well within time. Are there any questions from the committee with regard to Mr. Adams? Okay, thank you. So I will therefore invite Cheryl Deakin to come down and speak in support of the application if she's here, yes? I see somebody moving behind me. No rush, again, take your time. So again, we can afford 3 minutes for you, and there may or may not be a question or two when you're ready.
Good morning, everybody. Well, my name is Cheryl Deakin, and I'm here to speak for the dismantling business subject to approved planning. I live literally opposite the front entrance of this yard, so very close. I was originally against the idea, worrying it would be noisy, dangerous and messy, although despite it not being actually up and running as yet, the work to improve the site has been positive. It's made a huge impact environmentally. I am aware there has been complaints and worries around some of the noise of occasional broken glass and the safety stand on the forklift, none of which I've really heard. And if I did, surely would blend in with the general agricultural noise, which, to be fair, living in the country and the fens is what we should expect. I've lived in the village 43 years, so, you know, do get used to tractors, combines, etc. I had 6 Arctic lorries parked outside my house a couple of weeks ago, waiting to go down Broad Road to collect the sugar beet. All of their engines was running, and this was before 7 a.m. and then all day up to 7 p.m. No restrictions with this happening, so I really hardly see the issue running a business throughout the day. This used to be a 24-hour yard with minibuses, courier vans going and coming back throughout the night for many, many years, which belonged to my father. And if my father should be with us now, it still would be. We have many businesses in the village. We've got Lambert's Timber Yard, we've got a tyre company, which is less than a mile away. Since these guys have taken on the site, they have worked incredibly hard to tidy and improve it, wanting to bring jobs to village and have a local garage to help the villagers with their cars, etc. They have definitely improved the entrance of this yard and also made it so much easier and safer to pull out on the main road from Beck Bank, as the traffic entering our village from High Fen can be dangerous, speed in excess of 60 miles per hour, which I don't understand why, to be fair, it's not a 40 miles per hour. We have many houses and would be a lot safer if the restrictions were dropped. This would bring jobs to the village. These guys are very friendly, who would help out anybody. They did come to houses originally to see what we would think of the idea, and yeah, I don't see the problem. I really, really don't. The noise, I barely hear, and like I say, I've lived in the village 43 years, always has been a working yard, and they have just tidied it, the fence, they've just made it so much better. So yeah, I really do, hope that they get approved. Thank you.
Thank you. And without calculating, you were second to spare. Now, any questions before you leave? No? Okay. So you're free to go back to your seat. Now, going back to Mr. Willis, is there any comment before I open to committee? I can see him shaking his head no. So I'll therefore move over to committee. How do the committee feel with regard to this application? And I'm looking for some enthusiasm in one direction or other. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have immense sympathy for what Mr. Adams described. However, as Mr. Willis has already alluded to, in reality, this is a technical exercise. It is merely making sure conditions are adhered to. So in reality, because this is merely a technical exercise, Chairman, and nothing has changed from when this application was granted, I feel we have no option but to do the same, Chairman, because if we didn't, I suspect we would have costs coming our way, and it certainly wouldn't be defendable at appeal, so I'm quite happy on that basis, Chairman, notwithstanding the concerns that Mr. Adam has, which I do have immense sympathy for, to move it.
Thank you. Councillor Reid, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I know this particular site particularly well. Haven't declared any interest, but my son-in-law does live within the parish. I think it's been very interesting to be able to equate between the two residential presentations that have been made to us. It allows us perhaps to give a balance on what we've heard. And of course, we are looking in planning terms, and it has recommendation here, and albeit that I have some sympathy with one resident, I fully understand the working yard and whatever, but in planning terms I couldn't put forward to the committee a reason for refusal on those grounds. So on those basis I will be supporting the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton, please.
For a very similar remark, Mr. Chairman, I'm disappointed that this is back with us, and I understand the only reason it is back with us, taking of our time this morning, is because pre-commencement conditions weren't adhered to. However, unfortunately, planning being what it is, we are not allowed to take that into account on this occasion. We have to take into account the fact that we granted permission last time it was before us, and as with previous speakers, I just don't see the grounds for us not to approve it this time. Simply, the policy position, the development remains as it was the last time it was granted permission by the committee a few months ago. Nothing material has changed, but I would just re-emphasise that I'm disappointed that it is back with us and the reasons why it is back with us. But I don't know if it's been formally seconded, but happily formally seconded. I wouldn't say happily, I will formally second it.
Thank you for your comments again. Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Very, very similar. Listened to both presentations, got sympathies both ways. This was before us. It has conditions in place, and I can't think of a reason why I could object to it, so I will support it.
Thank you. I have no further speakers. Mr Willis, any comment? There's a no there, so therefore proposed by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Ashton, that the application is granted. All in favour, please show now. Thank you. And anybody against? One against, everybody else was for, so therefore that is clearly carried. So thank you very much for that. We will therefore move on to other reports, and item 7.1 takes us to the planning issues surrounding Biscathorpe. And Mr McBride, the floor is yours for this application.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as you say, this takes us to other reports, and the report relates to the outcome of the planning appeal. So just for councillors' information, that where we've dealt with a planning appeal, we bring the outcome of the appeal to the committee so that you're aware of the decision. So this one, if you can cast your minds back a couple of years, it went to the planning committee, which was held in Louth in 2021. The resolution at that time was that permission should be refused, and as a result of that, the applicant made an appeal against the council's decision. The appeal was heard in October 2022, and it's taken a year from the date of the hearing until the inspector's decision has been released. So this report draws attention to the fact that the inspector has allowed the appeal. You'll see in the report, or attached to the report, the inspector's decision, and you'll note that whilst the inspector came to the conclusion that there was the application is contrary to the development plan, that due to national need, national circumstances, that particular need in his mind was sufficient to outweigh that conflict with the development plan, and therefore permission was granted as set out in the appeal decision attached to the committee report.
Thank you, Mr McBride. Yes, it was a very interesting journey we took with this application a long time ago, and I will put it a long time ago. To recall, some members weren't present today, were not members of the committee at that time, but if you recall, the County Council did go and do a site visit to the location. We did hold a local meeting to Louth so that people, the public, could hear what decision was taken. The council did make a decision at that day, and the planning appeal went to the planning inspectors. The planning inspectors have taken quite some time looking at it. I don't know quite what they've been doing with it over that period of time, and we did discuss informally at County Council behind the scenes when we might see a response, but the inspectors came back with their decision, and their decision rules, unfortunately. So, for those members that weren't part of the committee at that time, yes, you can vote one way or the other, because we are noting the report today. So that's simply where we need to be. Councillor Ashton, you're indicating, followed by Councillor Reid and Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I mean, notwithstanding that when this item was debated, I was a member of the committee and I supported the application in my own assessment of the merits one way or the other at the time. I'm really interested, I think it's actually a credit to the committee that the decision that the committee came to and the ground on which it did so, insofar as the impact on the area of outstanding natural beauty, the impact on the landscape, have more or less been upheld by the decision of the inspector. The inspector does agree that that application, that development, isn't compatible with an area of outstanding natural beauty. The only ground really on which it has gained its permission is the quite narrow remit that the need for the development, which, you know, when that's weighed up, that overrides in this circumstance the issue surrounding impact on landscape of the area of outstanding natural beauty, which that wouldn't have been the conclusion that I'd have come to, and I often look at read inspection judgment and with a sense of humour, but I'm pleased that the core decision, the core judgment of the committee, even though I was of a different view, has found to have been sound on this. It was just when it's all weighed in the balance that it came to a different outcome.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Reid, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, Chairman, we listen to the local people, we listen to the need, and we listen to the circumstances. And to learn where the inspectorate's concerned that we were right to listen to the need and to defend the situation, I feel quite proud that we as a committee actually did challenge and we made a decision we made. Of course, in appeals there is always a cost when an appeal is lost. But of course we sit here and we adjudicate and we liaise where the public tax purse is concerned. I think the thing that particularly sort of makes the situation really difficult to sit here, and I'm sure the members agree, is when we then have to assess national need. You know, that is a real big one for us within our county council, within our own county, and we jealously regard and try to look after our county of Lincolnshire. So on balance, yes, I understand. Yes, I respect, and I'm sure everybody else actually respects the national need. But our local environment and the reasons we sit here and we represent our electorate is about looking after the place that they live, and that decision was upheld. So for that, I rest my peace in the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine's slightly a bit more technocratic and technical than the two speeches that have been made. I was informed by one of my local residents who's involved with an organisation, SQS Biscathorpe. They have launched a statutory review into this. It's just a question of, to Mr McBride, how does that work? How does that function? What would our involvement be? Because I know I have had and I don't know if it's right and proper, hence my deferring to you, Mr McBride, but I have had a request that we basically write a letter in support of the review and nothing more potentially, but I'll defer to you because I don't know the process, how it works out, and it's not something I've come across, so I'd welcome some enlightenment on the situation, please.
Certainly this is here for noting today, but if it's going to become more technical, it's perhaps something to deal with outside of the meeting. But Mr McBride, if you want to respond now, you're welcome to do so.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm not aware of any challenge that's been made. If it has been made, we haven't, well, certainly I haven't been made aware of that. The process to challenge a decision by the planning inspectorate is to go through a judicial review. There's a period of 6 weeks from the date of the decision, which was the 3rd of November, to lodge that request for a judicial review. As I say, I've not seen anything that's sort of passed my desk to suggest that that's taken place, but obviously it doesn't mean the county council has to be party to that. It's you know, a local organisation, an action group or an individual can do it themselves. So I can't really say very much more about it because I don't know what grounds that's being lodged under.
Okay, well, thank you for those comments. That's much appreciated. I don't see anybody else wishing to speak. This is here for noting, so there isn't a vote required, but I think that the people of Lincolnshire do have a feel for how the planning committee feel with regard to it. Okay, so I'll therefore move you on to the next item, and that's 7.2, which is the application by the West Burton Solar Project Limited for an order granting development consent. Now, earlier on, I don't know, is Eve Brown here? Yeah. Okay, behind me, well, there you go, you see, it's pantomime season behind you. I don't know quite how this will go. Would you like to come down, or Mr McBride, are you going to introduce this report?
Yeah, I'll introduce it first, Chairman, if that's okay. Yeah, so this report is for a nationally significant infrastructure project. You'll recall that at the last meeting, a report was brought to this committee seeking approval for the committee to give, in the end, delegation to the head of planning to submit the local impact report for this project. And we discussed at the last committee the local impact report and basically the direction of that report to be submitted to the examining authority. At that time, the expectation was that the local impact report would need to be submitted on the 24th of November, but subsequently the examining authority have changed their timescale for the deadlines for the reports to be submitted, and the local impact report and the council's written representations now need to be submitted by the 7th of December, which is this week. So without going into a huge amount of detail, as we discussed this at the last committee, you'll see in the report before you that the proposal is for a project under the nationally significant infrastructure regime to produce 480 megawatts of energy to be transferred to the West Burton power station. Also, there's an element of battery storage within the project as well, and that's sort of set out in detail in the report as well. So I think just to update you a little bit from what was brought to the committee last time. So the report that came last time was to include the local impact report, and at that time the information to support the council's concerns regarding the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land wasn't available, and that was received after the report had been before the committee. So that you're aware of the contents of that report, that is included as an appendix to the committee report this morning. And also, because you haven't seen this yet, the section in the report that deals with the agricultural land classification, or the comments relating to that, on page 166 at the bottom there, H, which carries on for a couple of pages. The content in this report reflects what's actually included in the local impact report, so you can see the details that were included, which weren't, as I say, before the committee when we last discussed this last month. So if we just go to the slides, if that's okay, just to give just a reminder as to where we are. So this is the number of solar projects in the area, and this plan has been updated since it was last shown to you last month. A further scheme has now emerged just over the River Trent in Nottinghamshire. It's basically, hopefully you can see it on the plan there, it's called Steeple. We can just go, it's basically adjacent to the Gate Burton project, so it's just to the left of that. If you could just drop the cursor down a little bit, a little further up to the right. That area there, yeah. So that's a new scheme that has emerged in this area since the plan was provided to you at the last committee. Next slide, please. And again, as shown last time, these are the 4 projects that are in this area. 3 of those are currently at examination, and the Tilbridge scheme, which is in the sort of northeast corner, is expected to be submitted for examination in March next year. Next slide, please. And this slide shows in detail the West Burton scheme, the outline of the order limits, and the different areas and the connection cable route to the West Burton power station. Next slide, please. So the next series of slides just go into a little bit more detail of each individual sort of component of the project. So this is West Burton 1. Next one, please. West Burton 2, and then the final slide is West Burton 3. So those were shown to you at the last committee. So bringing the recommendation to your attention, so what is proposed today or recommended to you is that the County Council objects to the project for the reasons set out in the recommendation on page 172. Without going into great detail, I'll just highlight each of those areas of concern. So the first one of those is due to the negative impact on the landscape and visual character of the area. Secondly, in relation to a tension in terms of the loss of best and most fertile agricultural land, which is the second bullet point. The third bullet point relates to the negative impact on the users of a public right-of-way in either within or close to the order limits, and some concerns about how those public rights-of-way would be dealt with. So moving over the page to 173, at the top there, concern in relation to I suppose identifying the amount of archaeological deposits in the area. Your officers consider that what has been put forward in the application isn't sufficient in terms of the amount of trial trenching and other works that have been undertaken to identify the potential for archaeology in the area. The next one down there, in terms of waste provision, so that there's a concern that both due to this project and the other projects in the area, that as those projects will obviously have panels and other infrastructure that will reach their end of life before the scheme finally is completed, and there's a concern that there isn't sufficient facilities available to deal with that waste that's going to be created from the panels and other infrastructure as they reach their end of life. Moving down the list there, there's a concern from a highway perspective that particularly in one of the accesses to West Burton 1, that isn't sufficient to basically enable the amount of traffic and the size of the traffic that would be required to bring the equipment and infrastructure to site. That local highway network isn't sufficient to absorb and accommodate that amount of traffic and that size of traffic. And then finally that the Secretary of State's attention is drawn to the fact that if development consent order is granted, then there is a need for appropriate community benefits for the area to compensate for the impact this development would cause in that area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now, behind me I've got Eve Browning, apparently. Good morning. If you'd like to come down and address the committee, because you are listed as wishing to speak. Technically, I don't know if you are allowed 3 minutes or longer. It's a 3-minute speech.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
previously
okay.
we've said 3 minutes.
Okay, right. So I'm just verifying where we stand with this. So 3 minutes to address the committee. Potentially, the committee might ask you a question to 2 afterwards, and we go from there. Floor is yours.
Hello. I would like to introduce myself as Eve Browning, the Project Development Manager working for Island Green Power, who are the developer of West Burton Solar Project. You may remember seeing me here recently to represent our other solar NSIP development in this area, Cottam Solar Project. As I stated for Cottam, the project team of West Burton Solar Project have built a good working relationship with Lincolnshire County Council and its officers, and I would again like to express my gratitude for this. We are pleased to see and acknowledge the positives in the West Burton Local Impact Report, noted at paragraph 35 of the committee report on page 170, such as the strong contribution towards net zero and significant biodiversity net gain. There have also been some negatives identified and summarised within paragraph 36, and on these I would make the following comments. On landscape and visual, we continue dialogue with the Council on landscape and visual impacts, both standalone and cumulatively, and have submitted additional information into the examination to clarify our assessment conclusions. On agricultural land grade, whilst there is the use of best and most versatile agricultural land associated with the West Burton Solar Project, given that the development is not permanent and that all elements can be restored to agricultural land on decommissioning, there will be no permanent loss of agricultural land. For public rights of way, no public rights of way are intended to be lost or diverted permanently as a consequence of the development, and the impacts upon the public rights of way are assessed fully in the landscape and visual impact assessment and public rights of way management plan submitted with the application. A new permissive path is also proposed. For archaeology, I can confirm that we are in disagreement with the Council over the approach to archaeological investigation, but we continue to discuss these areas of disagreement. For waste, the effects of waste generated by the scheme have been assessed in the environmental statement, and although a significant effect has been identified on landfill facilities in Nottinghamshire, targeted mitigation is proposed with opportunities to be explored and secured in the decommissioning statement. And on highways, we note the highways objection regarding the construction access to the West Burton 1 site and are working with Lincolnshire County Highways to provide further information and adjustments to the proposed construction traffic management, and it is hoped that this objection will be removed in the near future. Finally, I note the recommendation for a community benefit scheme to be established. The West Burton Solar Project has committed throughout the development process to providing a package of community benefits and underwent initial conversations with the Lincolnshire Community Foundation to start off that process. Again, as for the Cottam Solar Project, we would welcome further discussion with the Council to firm up proposals further. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for your comments. Is there any questions of the committee of Eve Browning, please? No, well, you've escaped well there again. Okay, any comments from Mr McBride at this stage? Okay, so you have the recommendations in front of you, and obviously the summary is at the beginning of the report, but they're listed in detail between 172, pages 172, 173. I'm quite happy to move those recommendations. Can I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Would anybody else like to speak to the report? Councillor Smith, before I take it to a vote.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't mention about the impact on BMV and agricultural land, as that's covered quite well in the report, that 25% of it is grade 1 and 2. What I would state, Chairman, and this is for the record and something that Mr McBride may wish to look into if he deems it appropriate, being a qualified planning officer, is with regard to subsection G on page 116 and the economic proposals. In the short, in the short term, there may be some positive economic benefit. However, in the long term, long to medium term, the implications of this, with the potential of the cumulative impact if more than one scheme, for example, is granted, would be exceedingly harmful to West Lindsey and the immediate area especially, owing to the fact that the two biggest areas of employment in West Lindsey are agriculture and tourism, both of which, for obvious reasons, Chairman, would be harmed if this scheme was allowed as per our impact report states. And my final question to Mr McBride is, would paragraph 2 in subsection G be conditioned if allowed by the examining authority. Excuse me.
So I think that relates to employment and skills. Is that the sort of area that you're sort of focusing on? At the moment, in the draft development consent order, which is being provided by the applicant for the examination, there is a requirement, which is what you're more familiar with, is a planning condition that is recommended for the development consent order if it's approved, and that requires the applicant to come forward with a scheme to look at potential for employment and skills and other opportunities in the area. That's something that you know, can be looked at in a bit more detail as more I suppose information starts to emerge, and you know, there is potentially some discussion, and you know, it depends on how these things develop, but you know, on the south bank of the Humber, there's obviously you know, an industry that's developed in terms of wind turbines and the manufacturing associated with that, and it might be that you know, if a number of these schemes get consent, then it might be that becomes a situation where it reaches a threshold where it might be more economical to I suppose manufacture the panels and other infrastructure in this area rather than bringing them from overseas. And also, I suppose there would also be a need for some sort of skills and job opportunities to maintain and to look after these solar farms if these consents are granted. As part of that, I think there's a potential for some sort of apprenticeships to be developed in the local colleges to ensure that, you know, that there is a mechanism for the local community to basically develop the skills and the expertise that would be necessary to support this sort of development. So I don't know if that sort of addresses the questions that you're asking, but there certainly is a expectation that if consent is granted, then that that would be a package of measures that would need to be looked into in a bit more detail, and both the district council and the county council as host authorities would be involved in those discussions.
Okay, thank you very much. So those are suitable comments. So the recommendations have been proposed by me, Councillor Fleetwood, seconded by Councillor Skinner. I'm going to offer it to the meeting. All in favour of those recommendations, please show now. Those against? One against. Everybody else was for, so therefore they are clearly carried. Okay, well, on the basis of that, I see no further business, I believe. So I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and your participation. Wish you a safe journey home, and I know it's slightly early in December, but to all involved, family, friends, whoever you might be involved with, I hope you have a good festive break. See you soon.